Welcome to the Recovery Stories podcast, bringing you stories of hope, healing, and triumph over the bondage of addictions, mental health struggles, trauma, and dysfunctional family systems. Our courageous storytellers have chosen to live their journey out loud in order to show others that they don't have to suffer in silence. The stories you will hear are raw, real, and may involve graphic and triggering content. This podcast is brought to you by Promises Behavioral Health's Rooted alumni community. If you or a loved one are struggling, have questions, or are ready to take the next step, call our admission center at 877-351-7504 or visit us online at www.promisesbehavioralhealth.com. Our team is ready and waiting to answer the call for help.
Hey everybody, welcome to this special episode of Rooted Recovery Stories. My name is Patrick Custer and I'm your host. I'm so glad to be here today, sharing another story of recovery and hope and elevating a voice of recovery in a place that's is so needed. We talk about so many different stories of recovery on this platform, and today is no different. Today we've got my friend Nick Choate here from Nashville, Tennessee. Nick, welcome, and thank you so much for coming on.
Hey, Patrick. Thank you. Man, what an honor. So this is always a pleasure to get to talk with other practitioners. And man, you're absolutely right. We don't really get as practitioners or clinicians to really share our story. So I'm excited to be able to do this.
Me too. I know. I've been really pumped about getting to do this, and glad the day is finally here. So let's dive into it. I know, I told you I wanted to ask you to share a little bit about the process addictions, defining that for people who might not understand, and also when it comes to sex and intimacy disorders, what does that mean, and how do we classify that for the layperson? Where does help us better understand that?
Yeah. So this has definitely been something that I guess maybe a little to frame a little background. So when I came into this, I was coming out of a business. I was coming out of business industry. I was coming out of marketing and sales with a local banking organization. I didn't really know what I wanted to do when I grew up, and so I think by the age of 30, I'd kind of figured out I don't like banking and I don't like marketing and sales, and I don't care about technology and IT management. And so, but the whole time that I was doing all these things, I was working with young men in high school, college, and then at our church, we were discussing a lot with our men's organization there that around lust, around pornography use, and so this idea of addiction never really actually came up until I actually got into this profession. And so I work in Nashville, Tennessee as a CSAT, or a certified sexual addictions therapist. And yeah, this idea of process or behavioral addiction, especially from sexual shame, pornography, compulsive masturbation, hypersexuality. These are all kind of terminologies that we use, to help us to understand, more of a behavior.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think one of the best examples that was really given to me was sex is very much, or like sexual addictions is very much like an eating disorder. Being human, if we have an eating disorder, we're not going to stop eating food.
Mm-hmm.
And very much the same way, we're not going to stop having sex or being intimate with other people. And so we find that um, as we interact with sex, or coming from different family backgrounds where sex was shamed or sexuality was not talked about, it was a rigidity or kind of a disengagement style of a family of origin, that we come with some misshapen guidance as to how to address sex.
Yeah.
So so when I kind of think about it, this idea of, how do I know if this is an addiction or not? It's, well, does this cause problems?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Do I have secrets that I keep? Do I make excuses for certain behaviors? Um, has this caused harm to myself or to others, both physically, emotionally, mentally?
Mm.
Um, there's a lot of kind of great little checklists out there that we
Yeah.
use, whether it's through SAA, um, folks like who is it? Rob Weiss has done a great job with his book Sex Addiction 101, where he kind of has a bit of a checklist in there.
Yeah.
But those really are the big pieces of it. Is that, yeah, has this caused me problems? And what problem, like what areas of my life has it caused me problems? Have I tried to reduce this? This is another really good one. Have I tried to slow down, reduce, change my behavior, but all the time I find myself kind of going back to it as a point to medicate emotions, or like big emotions, heavy emotions, or um, to help navigate difficult times in my life.
Mm.
So
That makes sense.
yeah,
That's
I
very
hope so.
helpful.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah. And so having that foundation, I hope that helps kind of provide a template for understanding as we process through your story.
Absolutely.
And yeah, so tell us a little bit about your, young life, where
Oh
you're
man.
born, family life, all that stuff.
Yeah, you know, I had a guy ask me one time. He said, Nick, who are you? And I told him all the things that I did, where I worked, where I went to school, where I was born. And he goes, no, 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 no. He's like, I want to know who you are.
Mm,
And so I've really sat with that question, and I have to admit, one of the great things, one of the great challenges of that is to kind of find out and understand more of who I am. And so I am I am the son of a divorced mother and father. I am half Cherokee. I am half English, Irish, Scottish. I am a husband. I am a bully dad, and what that means is we have bulldogs in our home that we foster, we adopt, that we raise, and they're my fur kids at the moment. So
mm.
I'm an Enneagram 7. With a wing 7, from what I've been told. So I get kind of
Awesome.
hyper about things and excited about new stuff coming down the pipeline.
Is seven the enthusiast?
Oh yeah, man.
That's
We're the
that's uh,
champagne.
that's me too. I can never remember my number. I just remember what it's called. So,
Yeah, this is why we get along so well,
yep,
man.
yeah, yeah,
That's awesome. So yeah,
yeah.
so and I have to admit that I didn't know myself for a number of years before I got into recovery.
Mm,
And so going back and really beginning to tease out the story has been huge for me. And it actually took me 30 years to get to a place where I was really willing to do that. So to kind of jump right into it,
yeah.
yeah, I was born in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and to a mother at the time when she conceived me was 16 years old, and to a father who was, you know, just a strong, independent blue collar worker. He was about 20 years old at the time. And so when she was 17, before she turned 17, she had found out that she was pregnant. My grandparents had found out about it. And because they were very active in the religious community, the church community at the time, and their daughter was, had a child out of wedlock, like
Mhm.
there was this idea of, you know, this would look really bad to the family if this little boy, came into the world and his mom and dad, weren't married, and the church found out about this. So they considered, in the beginning, um, to possibly abort. Now, even back at that time, that was still pretty risky, right? Because that was
Mhm.
not really something that people thought about. It's what people did, but I mean, when people found out about it, you were ostracized.
Mhm.
So they thought about it for a short period of time, and lo and behold, my mom said, "No, I'm gonna have this. I'm gonna have this kid. I'm gonna have this little boy, and and we're gonna raise him." And so my mom and my dad, 17 and 20 years old, did get married for a short period of time. They had me, and you know, I hear stories about it early on that it was a good relationship for my mom and my dad. Um, but there's a lot of it that still feels blank. And I still
Mm,
feel like I'm missing, like filling in the pieces a little bit. And so they divorced after about a few years, and I think my dad says that they were just so young that they didn't really know how to do relationship,
mm,
and so uh, so my mom, being the strong woman that she was, she continued to raise me, and so she was very independent. I think by all classifications, like she came from a very well-to-do family. She
mhm,
came from a very my grandfather worked as a physical therapist. Um, you know, bright man. My grandmother was a teacher for several years, and so both of them had college education under their belt. You know? And so in during that time, they had offered to try to kind of help, to be a part of my life, and she basically said, "No, I'm going to do this on my own." So 17 years old, what would have made her about 20 years old, and she's trying to adult. And so she never really had a childhood. She never really had a teenage life or her 20s. And so um, she moved from my dad and that relationship immediately into another relationship. And as I go back and I look at it, there's this kind of it's kind of this mentality of I think I can help people in need. And so that's where my stepfather came into play. And he I want to bless him, but man, he was not a good man, you
mm,
know. So from the ages of about 3 and 4 years old, um, he was very physically abusive to my mom and I. My mom, I think, just again being a strong woman that she was, um, did everything she could to protect herself and myself. But one night I had heard a bang in my room, and I was probably 4 years old or something like that. And I can remember still uh, waking up and opening my door and seeing my mom walking out with blood gushing from her head and from her lip, and he had been hitting on her that night, and he had
mm,
come in and drunk, and so I was just remember being so afraid of him, um, and so she again, she tried to do the best that she could to protect my brothers and I from him. But he, when he would get drunk, you know, it was just kind of like everybody go to your corners and just let's hope and pray that he wouldn't find you.
mm,
Yeah. So the good part is I did have a dad, and he was very protective. So um, while my mom growing, being in that particular relationship, she got harder. She got more stern. She got more angry. I think just the circumstances around it.
sure.
So there's a lot of rigidity I've learned that was in that family, and or in that side of the family that actually graduated even till us growing up. And then on my dad's side, it's just like crossing train tracks here. It's like, when I go to my dad's, and that was always interesting to go over to his house every other weekend and to be with him and, you know, bachelor. And then I think he remarried somewhere a couple of years afterwards. And they just kept a very just kind of loose kind of they would engage with me, but they there were a lot of things that really weren't appropriate for a child to have access to.
Mm,
And I can just think like some of the first times that I crossed over and viewed pornography was probably 5, 6 years old,
wow.
and so if if it wasn't on television, then it was hidden in the magazine rack beside the chairs, or if it wasn't there, it was in the bathroom, and if it wasn't there, it was just laying out on the bed somewhere. So there was never any. it was never anywhere that I couldn't go find it. But there was never any real instruction on how to, like, that's not good for you, Tiger, or, this is really for adults. It was just kind of, it was just kind of like, uh, let's not look at that. And then no other reason given. Right. So that was a good chunk of probably 4 or 5 years old on up to 9, 10 years old whenever I had
Right.
access to that.
And of course, you, as a kid, regardless of, an arousal template being present or not, it's something clearly you're like, oh, I'm not supposed to be doing that. I want to do like you go seek it
Yeah.
out, Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I had this wonderful opportunity to work with Jay Stringer and some folks over at the Adler Center out in Seattle. And so we were working through a story training and or kind of a narrative training, and they talked about putting together a narrative of some difficult stories that you've had to encounter in your life. And so one of the ones that I could think about was the first time I was exposed to porn, and it actually wasn't at my dad's that I can remember, but it was at a neighbor kid's house.
Hmm.
And just the when I went back and I played that, it was writing that story out, I could just remember vividly where I was at, where I went. It was his brother's room up, up in the attic, and I could just remember opening the magazine up. Well, first I can remember seeing the front of it and seeing Playboy. I was like, oh boy, I'm a boy. That's cool,
Yeah.
right? And so I can
Right.
remember opening it up, and there's this beautiful woman right there, and I can just remember feeling just this rush and blush over me of, I don't think I'm supposed to see this, but I don't think I can turn my eyes away from it either.
Hmm.
And and I remember from that point, I remember looking at women differently, right? Not just girls like my age, but I can remember looking at older adult women and even teenage girls differently. And I
Hmm.
was like, wow, like what is this? Girls don't have this, but my mom, my stepmom, my babysitter, they all look like this, right?
Hmm.
And I just remember that switch being clipped in my mind and going, okay, I need to be on the lookout for this.
Hmm.
And how that was just a big turn in my
Yeah.
story. So
Well, yeah, no, I was just going to say, so, you said that that was something that, moving forward, you started to notice that your dad's house is available. They kind of be like, oh, no, not for you. But clearly you're going to go find it anyway. And,
yeah,
that was a number of years. So leading up into, you were talking about up until, 9, 10, 11 years old, what
right.
we know what that's leading into, right?
I mean,
So,
gosh, yes. Hormones going
yeah.
crazy. And uh, that was at 8, 9 years old. I didn't see my dad as often because it got sprung on us that we were moving from Oklahoma to Tennessee. And I don't remember the story real clearly. I just remember my mom coming in with a box saying, okay, we need to get started, you get it packed up. We're going to be moving soon. And I was like, moving where? Like across town? We had moved so often from being in my grandparents' house to being with my stepdad to being back to my grandparents' house to living, in an apartment to moving back into the apartment. Just, you know, I was like, great, we're moving to a new apartment. And she goes, no, we're moving to Tennessee. And I was like, where the hell is Tennessee? Right. And come to find out, we actually got to go visit because my grandfather, he had been away, and we learned, oh yeah, he's been working in Nashville. So we had traveled that summer out to go see him just before we moved, and got to stay at I guess it's like Nashville Shores, so it's like this big water park. But back in the day, it was just this campground that we
Yeah.
stayed at, and it had had these couple of water slides, out in the on the land, and oh my gosh, we would run up and down that for hours. So we just thought, oh great, we're going to move back to the lake. We're going to be able to be where the slides are, and we're, so that's where we're going to live. And then they're like, no, we're, just the
Right.
naivety of a child, right?
Yeah.
So we upped and moved, and in a matter of like a couple of weeks. And a large part of that I learned later on was to get away from Ernie, was to get away
Mhm.
from my stepfather, because he had every time that we had moved, come to find out that he had tracked us down. And so in order to stay safe, we kept moving. And so this was our way of really getting some distance, and then for my mom to kind of hit reset.
Yeah.
And my grandparents had said, "Yeah, we would love to have you all there. We'd love to help you raise the boys, and and to be a part of their life." So we moved to Tennessee when I was 8 years old, turning 9 years old, and I probably want to say that was my first bout of depression,
Hmm.
because moving that far from friends that I had grown up with, known, it it was just such a change. It's just such a culture shock to me.
Sure.
And so,
Makes sense.
what's that?
I said it makes sense for sure.
Oh man, and I can look back on it all now and go, wow, yeah, that was a really telling time. But for the
Yeah.
longest time, it was natural in my mind to go, you know what? Like, I don't understand why I'm struggling with this. I don't understand
Mhm.
what the big deal is. And so, but lo and behold, I would just always kind of keep pushing that stuff down. And so we moved to Tennessee. I was away from my father, and I was away from a lot of that stuff growing up, and so kind of lived life as best I could. And and that's really where I started trying to make friends, and really struggled. School was hard. I remember having a teacher in fourth grade. She was so hard, and and I was struggling in school for the first time. I wasn't making any friends, and it just I hated it there. I hated it.
Mm.
I hated being here. And for the first time, I want to think that it was in December, and no, it was getting close to summertime because it was getting close to the end of the year. My teacher was getting concerned because I hadn't turned in several of my assignments, and so she had sent this letter home to my mom, and I had opened it, read it, and I was like, oh man, she cannot see this. And uh, and so I hid the letter until the next day when my teacher asked me for it, and I forged the letter in my best fourth
Right.
grade
Yeah.
ability to do so. And that
Mhm.
fallout was like, I later learned, like, that was my cry for, hey, you know things are not right. I need you guys to know I'm not right. But nobody understood it. They
Mhm.
just basically said, why did you do this? How could you do this to us? What in the world were you thinking? And then I got the beating of my life, and I was just left to sit in it. And I was like, this sucks. I need something to like fix this.
Mhm.
And I could just feel this just day crescendo. Just fourth through fourth and fifth grade, I would put on very much this happy face, jovial, everything's okay, play the golden kid. And then whenever I go to see my dad, that's when I would find like the HBO, the
Mhm.
Showtime, the videos, um, the Playboy stacks of Playboy magazines just out in the open. And hadn't learned about masturbation yet, but I knew that when I looked at those videos, or when I looked at those magazines, I felt this incredible, just that surge that I'd had when I was like 5 years old,
Right.
come over my body. And I was like, okay, I feel better now. And so as we navigated into teenage years, again, it started noticing girls, more my age, around middle school. And um, and so we basically had my mom. She just, with my grandparents there, she kind of began to distance herself, you know, with hormones and frustration and not really sure direction at the time. I just remember we just had this long drag out, like curse out. It's the best
Mhm.
I can remember it, of just how much I said I had hated her, how much she was, no mother to us. Mimi, Mimi and my papa, my grandparents were very much just our parents, and I just wrote her off. And I just remember the last thing I felt was just a slap across the face, and I was like, all right, that was it. And so every summer I'd go visit my dad, and I packed a little bit more stuff up than I normally did, and I said I'm moving to Oklahoma, and sure enough, I did it.
Oh,
And
wow. How old were
yeah,
you at this point?
13,
Oh, wow.
13 going on 14, 13
Right.
going on 20.
Yeah.
So, and so I talked my dad into it. He's like, okay, right? Like, I guess we could try this, right? And after that summer of being with him, and he said yes, I was like, yes, everything is going to be so much better. I'm going to have a parent that is going to listen to me, is going to check in with me. My dad and I are going to be like what we do on the weekends. We're going to be cool and best friends. And like school was beginning to start, and he like dropped the hammer. And he's like, here's what we're going to do. Here's where you're going to work. Here's, how you're going to do homework. This is what I want you in. This is what I want you to bed. This is when you're waking up. And I was like, what the,
Mhm.
who are you right now? And so just feeling just that pressure all the time to be this person, to be this kid. I'm the firstborn. I'm the gold child. I'm used to making good grades. I can't make a mistake, especially not like what I did in fourth grade. And it was like a Jenga tower building higher and higher every
Yeah.
day. And so the turning point of it was we got close to Christmas, and I was just sick and tired of feeling sick and tired. And so I saw my stepmom's purse there one day. I thought, you know what would make me feel better if I just went and bought whatever I wanted. So I had stolen her credit card, and I went to the ATM machine. I took out $500, and
Oh,
I just
wow.
went on a
You
shopping
went for
spree.
it.
I went big, man. Like that was the max at the time that you could take out of the ATM, right?
Yeah.
So the logic of a teenager.
Right.
And I have a nephew who's a teenager right now, and I'm like, son, where is your head?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So I went on this spree. Oh gracious. I went on this spree, and I thought, man, I'll feel better after all this, and I didn't.
Mhm.
And worst thing happened was that my dad found out about it, and we had this knockdown drag out. I mean, he found out about it, took me back to my room. You know, I can just remembered vividly everything playing out. He asked me, did I steal the credit card from him? And I told him, no, I didn't. And he asked me again, and I said, no. And I never could look him in the eye.
Mhm.
And before I knew it, he had grabbed me by the shirt collar, thrown me up against the wall. I mean, I'm probably all of 125 pounds at the moment, but he lifts me up off the wall, this blood curdling scream, and just says, don't effing lie to me, Nick. Right? I know you did it. Just tell me that you did. And I mean, both of us are bawling. And I'm like, yes, 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 I did it. And he just, I mean, and I thought he was going to punch me. I just literally thought he was just going to punch my face in. And I'm like, thank God this will be all over right now. And he let go of me, and as he brought me down from the ground, he just threw me to the ground, and he just said, I will never trust you again. And I was like, I have fallen from
Right.
this place,
That's so
that
much
Jenga
worse than
tower.
getting punched in the face.
I would have taken the punch in the face, man.
Yep.
I would have 10 times over, so 100 times over. And so, but that was that second bout of just depression. And it that's whenever it led into suicidal thoughts. It led
Mm,
into I felt so alone. I felt I felt like a piece of shit, honestly. And and I was like, I need something to make me feel better. And I just remember at that time, I mean, we had the internet, we had Showtime. My dad's house still had all that paraphernalia around. And so whenever I needed to, I just remembered I was 14 years old. And I remember just the first time I had masturbated, I was like, oh my gosh, what happened? And
right.
then, but then it was also like, oh my gosh, I feel amazing right now. And, but it's like some of my guys call it chasing the dragon,
Yeah.
right? It's that first time, that first hit that you get, and it's just like it sends you into like that's like Star Wars kind of like
Euphoric
warp
state.
zone. Yes,
Yeah.
yes. And but I never could reach back to that state again,
Hmm.
right? And but I just remember chasing after it time and time and time again. And so probably two, three, four times a week, like that's anytime I started feeling low, that's what I would turn to. And then it progressed on into later into not just in to viewing pornography, but to begin chasing girls. And I figured out, excuse me, pretty much along the way, how do I like I can pick up on what they're needing or what's missing.
Hmm.
And I never really figured out how I could do that until I started kind of going digging back in my story. And I was like, you know what? I could always gauge how my mom and dad were doing. And I could always either know when to ask them, or I could either stuff that down and go, hey mom, you okay? What's going on? Right. And I could be her confidant. I
Hmm.
could be I could be the one that I could be the good boy when everything was not
Yeah.
going well.
Yeah.
Or I could be my dad's confidant and I could be the one that he would tell me how he was doing. And I got really good at doing that. And I could do that with women too. And I was like, this is my superpower, right? And this will help me. And I've later realized like this will help me get what I want.
Hmm.
And I look back on that now with so much shame, with so much guilt and sadness of just the people that I had hurt, and realizing just littered in good intention, but it was out for selfish gain.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yeah, and it still breaks my heart to this day, just thinking of the people that I have done that, had done that to, just to, to use them to, what I had seen in the magazines, what I'd seen in the movies and the videos, acting all that stuff out.
Right.
And so I, it, in the, in this meantime, you know I'm starting to drive. I'm starting to have some more independence, and I'm starting to kind of buck up against the system. And 16 years old, I actually moved back with my grandparents after everything happened. And one of the rules in their household was that you have to attend church. So I was like, okay, yeah, I can do that. And so I began from what I had happened at my father's to coming back to Tennessee. I began to live this dual life.
Mm.
And so I could be one person in the dark. I could be one person by myself or
Right.
with a girl, and then I could be another person at church.
Yep.
And I knew the scriptures. I knew how to speak the walk, walk the talk
Hmm.
and talk the walk, and I could be everything to anybody, and no clue who I was. So
Mm.
yeah. So 18 years old, I'm graduating high school. I've got this severe problem that nobody knows about. And so I, I'm thinking I'm going to go on to college. We're going to, continue to do this. And then it just was kind of like something, just a roadblock hit. It's like, I don't know what I want to do. I'm so confused
Yeah.
right now. And so, yeah, that's when I started getting into banking. I started getting into marketing and sales for the bank. and I loved it because it allowed me to maintain an appearance that I liked, which
Hmm.
was that I have all my stuff together, and um, that I have money, and that I've got power, and that that I this can give me whatever I want.
Yeah.
And and I did that for about 3 years, and hid behind this facade, and lived that dualistic life of being the good boy, the good mentor at church, and then working in business, and then flirting and dating, and using people. And then when I was 20, I actually I became friends with a young lady that we had met through a camp, a church camp, and through that friendship, um, I fell in love, and I didn't know what I was feeling, but I knew that I knew that I would do whatever I needed to for her, and but my world started beginning to merge,
Hmm.
and she was a very very sweet, very kind woman, but I began to draw her into my darker world, and pushing the envelope for things that she said she would not do till she was married, and I'd said it, but um, yeah, saying and doing are two different things.
Right.
Wow. So I pushed the envelope too far one night, and you know, my parents actually caught us, and it was one of the most humiliating and most embarrassing things that she could have ever happened. And so she gave me back my engagement ring, and said this is probably not going to work out. And
Hmm.
again, I fell into that depression again. You know, and that's when lo and behold, stayed in that place for a good while and went back to dating. And that's when some of the guys actually at my church called me out. And one of them I can just remember. He very specifically said, Nick, he says, you're not real comfortable around guys, are you? I was like, what do you mean? He's like, you're much more comfortable being around women, aren't you? I was like, oh yeah, no, absolutely. He says, I would be scared of that. He says, I see how you talk with us, how you engage with us, and I see how you engage with women. And he says, I would be very cautious of that. And he says, I would even challenge you maybe to not date for a while. And I thought, what was the audacity of this person? I was like, little did I know that that's exactly what I needed to hear.
Yeah.
Right? He was the first person actually that ever spoken into me, and seen me for what I was doing, and not this. He saw the duality,
Right.
and I was so thankful. And so lo and behold, he begins to kind of draw me into the fold, and he kind of mentors me. We would
Hmm.
call it discipleship in the church, but he was just talking with me. He'd call me up at night, and he'd be like, "Where are your eyes at?" And I was like, "Well, right now I'm freaking sleeping. What are you doing?" And it's like, "Well, you're not
Yeah.
sleeping anymore. Let's go to Waffle House." I was like, "Oh, okay." So, but he talked to me. He began to help me understand about, his struggles with pornography. He helped me understand, some of the stupid stuff that he had done to girls in the church. And all throughout that, he began to help me to see that I have a problem.
Mm.
And and so through that conversation, I began having other conversations with other men. And I was like, hey, do you ever struggle with this? And they're like, oh, guy, yeah, man. I was like, do you ever talk to anybody about it? He's like, no, not really. I was like, why not? And for the first time, I was beginning to see my worlds are okay to be together, but it was also um, that I was beginning to talk about it. Somebody wanted to talk about it with me.
Hmm.
And they wanted to know me, not just this projection of who I wanted
The
people to think.
perfect, not just the fake perfect you. Right.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. I think back about that. I even get kind of emotional thinking back about that because that was the turn at 23. I mean, I was like, I don't want to continue to do this anymore.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of whenever I kind of put the pin and, or, the bookmark in and said, that's whenever I began to pursue recovery.
Mm-hmm.
And I could go for, I mean, I got to where he was helping me and just checking in with me, helping me to stay accountable. But I built up some sobriety around 2 weeks to a month. And then I struggled for about a year or two, staying at like 3 months. And, and then there was just something that happened just before I went away to college that I had sat down, I was reading my Bible, and I was in my prayer time, and I come across this verse, in Isaiah. It says, and he will raise the dead to life, and he will set the captive free. And I remember I just got really caught on that line. And I was like, what do you mean by that? I was like, I feel like I'm captive. I don't know why I'm still captive. And here you're
Mm-hmm.
sitting here saying that you want to set me free. Why am I not free? And I just sat on that for a long time. And and it was almost as if lightning had happened. He's like there's just voice in my mind. It was like, yeah, you're already free if you want to be.
Hmm.
I was like, Jay talks about this in his book Unwanted. He says, there's a difference of being freedom from as a freedom for, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know, there's something to be about being free from alcohol, sex, porn, masturbation, love addiction, overeating. But what are you gaining out of that freedom, right? There's nothing that we perceive to be gaining, you know, and it shifted to, "Well, what am I free for now?" And so I did. It was like, and it just in this image of my mind of just shackles falling off my arms, falling off my feet, and finally walking out of an open door prison. That I was like, oh my gosh, this is what it feels like to be free from this for even just for today.
Yeah.
And I remember it the masturbation began to slow down. I remember, and I could definitely see. I was like, you know what? I don't have to keep turning to that. The dating, I was getting a lot more comfortable just being with myself. I was
Mm-hmm.
just getting a lot more comfortable being with friends and people that loved me. And then out of that, you know, I thought, well, surely this is a call to ministry because that's what every Baptist kid thinks so.
Right. Right.
Right. And I was like, surely I'm gonna be called to the ministry. And so I started looking into finally going to college and looking into going to seminary. And it's so funny. Out of this whole time, I've you know I can only think back outside of that discipleship time. One time that I actually went to go see a therapist, and that was whenever everything happened with my dad and my stepmom, and they were just so taken aback by why in the world I had done some of that. So they sent me to a therapist, and I was like, I don't know why I'm here. And then he was a nice guy. He really was.
Yeah.
And I told him, I was like, you know what? Here's what I've come to understand. I was like, I did this because, I was really mad at my dad, for being one person, when we were here on the weekends and being a completely different person. I really wanted his attention. And I didn't like all the rules and regulations. I just kind of laid it out to him at 14
Yeah.
years old. And he was like, well, that's pretty well said, right? And after that, I thought, I'm cured. I'm good, right?
Mm-hmm.
And little did I know that, man, that was not even scratching the surface of dealing with that loneliness, that depression that was there. So it was
Yeah.
only in true relationship that I developed with this mentor, this discipleship buddy of mine, and then these other men that I began to
Mm-hmm.
experience what recovery felt like, what freedom felt like.
Yeah.
So yeah, so that kind of lends us into going into college and into, went away to college and had kind of called off dating for a good while. And you know, I thought, you know, I kind of I'd had some moments of flip flopping, and do I want to be a doctor, and do I want to be in business, and do I mean, I must have changed my major like 7 or 8 times, So, and I came home one summer, and my grandmother's like, I don't know why you're fighting this. You have a gift to counsel and to sit with people and to talk and to listen. And she's like, you're just fighting against it. And I was like, Mimi, there's no money in counseling. It's like, she goes, I bet there is. You need to go talk to so and so. And I was like, okay. And I'll come to find out, this is a good friend. Um, one of the guys that was in our group that was kind of holding, being accountable to us, was a therapist. And so I was like, you never told me you were a therapist. He goes, oh, yeah, I'm a marriage counselor. And so I sat down with him for lunch one day, and I was like, all right, my grandmother wants me to know if there's actually any money in doing this. And I was like, I want to have a family. I want to enjoy doing this work. And he goes, oh, yeah, don't look at the numbers. Like, you're going to be fine. And I was like,
Yeah.
really? And so he he kind of whispered the number to me. I was like, seriously? I was like, that's not what monster.com says.
Yeah. Oh gosh, those salary things, they're never right, right?
Oh man,
Yeah.
no. I was like, 28,000. Oh, man, didn't do anything with
Yeah.
$28,000 a year. So, so I came back to school with this new vision in my mind of just, this is what I want to do. I want to be a
That's awesome.
counselor. I want to be a therapist. Um, and I've always just had high aspirations to go on, just get my doctorate. And, and so I found myself while at the university. So I went to the University of, in Jackson at Union University, and, got my bachelor's degree in psychology. And I got another bachelor's degree in Christian studies, thinking I might go into pastoral counseling. And, and that's about the time in my senior year I met my wife, my now wife. She we had been friends through my engagement, and we had, she's about 3 years younger than I. I always kind of comment that I was 20 at the time and she was 17 at the time, which is about the same age my dad and my mom had me.
Hmm.
And that's when our friendship blossomed. We were best friends for, about 5 years, lost contact with one another. Facebook helped us to reconnect at the time,
Yeah.
and we just began corresponding that way for several months until um, a trip led us through Birmingham, and I asked her, if I could come just have coffee with her. And after that trip, I was just like, I know I'm not letting her get away this time.
Hmm.
I know she's the one. And so every weekend I would either be down in Birmingham or we'd be back in I'd be meeting her up in Nashville to spend the weekend and just get to know her again. And little do we know, we were just kind of engaged without being engaged at the time. And, 29 years old, we get married, and um, we've been married for 11 years this year. So
That's awesome.
yeah,
Congratulations.
thank you, man. So, and I think one of the hardest parts of that is just telling her my story, my
Yeah.
the embarrassment, the guilt, the shame of it all. And I think that this is, there was just something that she said. She said it not too long ago too, but she said, what you struggle with, Nick, is it's not any different than what I struggle with around the way I look at myself, or my anxiety, or um, around eating or exercising and all these things. She's like, I can get so latched on to something, and think that if I could just have that, or look this way, that I'm going to be happy. And she's like, I'm not. Right. And I
Hmm.
just get that so fixated in my mind. She's like, and is that kind of what that feels like to be in that, in your addiction? And I was like, actually, yeah.
Yeah.
you know, I was like, wow. So just that understanding and her willingness to understand and come alongside me. Now,
That's awesome.
nowhere, yeah. have I ever asked her that she needs to go to S-Anon with me, or that I felt like she needed to read this book about addictions, or being married to an addict, or anything like that. She's always just let it be mine. And with that hope and understanding, I've always just said, okay, this is my responsibility, because what I bring into our marriage, um, you know, it's mine. It's me.
Yeah.
So yeah,
That's awesome.
thank you.
And it's really cool because a lot of people don't understand, when those of us in different types of addictive behavior, um, it's hard sometimes for people to naturally understand. So it's cool that she was at that place with you right off the bat.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, very,
She's a very gracious soul, and I mean, you know, we've definitely have there have been moments. Um, I think one of the hardest times, and this is even embarrassing to be able to say, but in the beginning parts of COVID, I'd had a long stint of sobriety
Mhm.
around it, around any type of acting out behavior. And when COVID hit, and the stress of what do we do about the business? What do we do? How am I
Yeah,
going to do recovery? How am I? I had a relapse, and I had to go back and I had to tell her that, and I was like, man, and just the grace that was around that. She was like, okay, so you messed up, all right. So what are you going to do about it? And I was like, well, I'm going to make this right.
yeah,
Right. But it was a great reminder that even in doing this work, that there's a likelihood that, you know, that being a therapist, I'm still human. I'm still very much human.
yeah,
And then just a reminder that, um, that if we set back at any point, or if we get comfortable at any point, that whisper of that addiction is going to come right back in, and it's going to go, hey, I can fix this.
yeah,
Right. And while that's embarrassing, I also want it to be able to say, no, it helped us to readjust, reevaluate, and to say, what doesn't need to be in our life right now, or what doesn't need to be in my life. Where do I need to have better boundaries? Where do I need healthier things in my life
Well,
to, yeah,
on that note, and I'm in a different 12-step fellowship.
yeah, yeah,
And there in our literature, it talks about the wreckage of our past being one of
mhm,
our greatest assets for the future.
yeah,
And I can't help but think that that is the same for each and every one of us, and when we own our truth, own our past,
yeah,
it not only helps us move forward in an authentic way, but it's a ripple effect for everyone around us, right?
right, right,
And so, just even you talking about like, hey, this is embarrassing, but
yeah,
I'm going to be brave and talk about it. It is what it is, and at some point, it's part of our life.
yeah,
And
mm,
um,
that's good.
you know, yeah, I had another thought that I wanted to bring up as well.
Sure.
On just for somebody else listening, we all struggle differently,
Mm,
and I know, especially with sex and intimacy disorders, you were mentioning at the beginning of this that there's a number of different fellowships that look at sobriety framed in different
yeah,
ways,
mm,
and each person may have a different goal with what they're
mm,
seeking healing for,
right.
or
Yeah.
to regain, right?
Mhm.
Um, and I know I hear all the time because we have sex addiction programs at the ranch, and we have a number of alumni recovering from the various forms of intimacy disorders.
Mm,
That it everybody finds recovery in this realm from a lot of different walks of life, a lot
absolutely.
of different
Yeah,
places, right? Like
right. Yeah.
some people went way farther down the scale
Mhm.
than maybe you did, right?
Right.
Like ended up blowing hundreds of thousands of dollars
Right.
on coke and prostitutes in Vegas,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And ended up catching themselves about to commit suicide because of it, right? Doesn't matter where you are. I just wanted to present this thought
Mm.
that it doesn't matter where you are. If this is, if you've got that voice in your head that this is causing, your behaviors are causing you problems and stealing joy, and keeping you from thriving in your
Mhm.
personal life, um, then maybe it's time to seek and ask for help. And I just kind of wanted to
Yeah.
ask you this last question. So, to that
Sure.
person, man or
Yeah.
woman, that is watching or listening right now, what last bit of encouragement would you like to give to them?
Yeah. You know, that's a great question. And as I think about it, I mean, I still remember walking into that fellowship with my men at the church. And then I've also walked into SA communities here, in the area. I've also walked into ACA communities. Um, it always feels like you're that middle school, high school kid trying to walk into the cafeteria and to find your seat. That's what I would just equate it to. But you're absolutely right. Is that I think I think listen to that still small voice first off that is asking, you know, do we want something different,
Mm,
right? And I can remember that one in my mind, that part of me going, there's got to be something more. There's got to be something different.
mhm.
And they're one of the old timers in. I'm part of a CSAT recovery group nowadays, just because of the nature of our work,
Mm,
and so we get the chance to meet with other CSATs in recovery all over the world, which is
that's
incredible
awesome.
to me. Yeah,
Yeah.
and we're walking through not only just that, meeting once a week to do that, but also working back through the steps. And so, you know, e- sometimes, I will be at a local meeting just because I need that. But one of the old timers, he always says, a shame shared is cut in half, but a joy shared is doubled.
Mm,
And I
I
thought
really
that.
like that
I do too. Yeah, I
a
know.
lot.
And so as I thought about that, most times when I go back and I think about a shame shared, I was looking for who is that person that I trust that can be understanding, that is going to that has maybe spoken into me, that won't shame me, but if anything is going to listen and is probably going to give me some counsel and some direction, right? And that I can begin to share with them what's really going on. You know, let them be kind of that matchstick light for you, and then out of that, taking their advice, their grace, to say, you know what, I would really encourage you reaching out to a counselor, to maybe they themselves have been a part of a recovery fellowship, to some degree. There are a ton of different recovery fellowships across the globe. SA, faith based, SAA, spirituality based, SLAA. But then there's a lot of accountability groups out there, Pure Desire, Samson Society, life groups. I mean, guys, there's men and women. There's really no end for the help that's available.
Yeah.
So, but to listen to that still small voice in your mind that says, is there something more, is there still
Yep.
something better, and finding that person that um, that just be willing to listen, right?
Yep.
Yeah. So that would be my advice, that if somebody finds himself in that place of struggle, finds them kind of in that place of waffling, is
Sure.
to look for that person, and some folks, maybe you do need that more knee jerk response of just
Mhm.
going to an SA meeting or an SAA meeting, right? if anything, just start by looking online.
Yeah.
You know, SAA.
Google's an awesome tool, right?
That's right, man. I mean, it is an incredible tool.
Yep.
So check out what's out there. Use those self assessment checklists to ask yourself those questions. Right?
Yeah.
Have I tried to stop? Have I tried to lessen? Have I tried to control this? Right? And just be honest with yourself.
That's some really great advice. And, I'll just add to that. If you feel like, you're at the space where you just need, you need to get out of your life, aside from all the wonderful resources Nick just mentioned, there are programs like one we have just outside of Nashville called The Ranch, a residential program where you go and stay for a period of time and immerse yourself in this work to, identify traumas, triggers, all those things, and kind of go through a healthy brainwashing, if you will, of just, reprogramming the things that are broken, if you would like information on any of our programs, it's at the front and end of this podcast and in the show notes. So feel free to take advantage of that. Last thing I always want to leave you all with is that it is never too late to start loving yourself, and you're only one decision away from a completely different life. So, Nick, thanks so much for bringing your story and vulnerability today. We really appreciate it, and this has been a real pleasure.
Oh, thank you, Patrick. It's good to be with you guys.
Yes, sir. All right, with that, we are out.
For more information on today's episode, check out the show notes. Recovery Stories is brought to you by Promises Behavioral Health's Rooted alumni community. If you or a loved one are struggling, have questions, or ready to take the next step, call our admission center at 877-351-7504 or visit us online at www.promisesbehavioralhealth.com. Our team is ready and waiting to answer the call for help. Whether you're watching on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, or listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, please share with your friends. Follow, subscribe, and leave us a review. We are grateful for you and hope that you have been encouraged by today's episode. As always, remember you are only one decision away from a completely different life, and it is never too late to start loving yourself.